Hello all you beautiful people out there, what is going on? This is your friend Brady coming at you fast with another Legends of Runeterra video, and today we're going to be looking at a deck that I think has a lot of potential to be really good in Legends of Runeterra. Maybe it will change, most likely it will change as time goes on because this deck was constructed after preview patch 2 and before the open beta, but the concept of it should remain the same throughout, and that's kind of what I wanted to share with you guys today with this video. So I'd really appreciate if you guys could like the video and also upvote this deck on mobalytics.gg. I will link it in the description, and I'll also pin it in the comments below so you guys can check this deck out for yourself, so you guys don't have to squint your eyes and look at the video to try and copy the URL into your own browsers. Without further ado, let's get into the deck. Now, like I said, this deck was made between preview patch 2 and open beta. So at the time of making this video, I have not been able to test it out on any games, on any bots, nothing. But I wanted to get this idea out there, first of all, to kind of put my stamp on it, to say, hey, I had this idea, I made a video about it, I was here first, this is kind of where it started, which I know is a little selfish of me, I'm sorry. But also to kind of look back at it later and see how much it changed from patch to patch, and to kind of give you guys some ideas going into the open beta if you're bored and looking for Legends of Runeterra content right now, trying to figure out what could be good and what could be bad. Now again, what's most important about this deck is the concept. The actual units and spells are subject to change, and if you guys have any criticisms or think you can make a better version of this deck, go ahead. I want to give you guys a quick disclaimer that I am not a professional player. I did not grind out countless hours in Hearthstone nor Magic the Gathering Arena. Okay, I'm not this crazy trading card game god. I'm just a dude who likes numbers and who really enjoys Legends of Runeterra. I got into both preview patch 1 and preview patch 2, and I played a lot, and I really dig this synergy here. So let's finally break it down. So the first thing that you would notice in Legends of Runeterra is that aggro decks are very popular. Aggro decks are decks that just try to win as aggressively and as quickly as possible. And because the Nexus health is 20 points on each side, the games don't last too long when you're playing Legends of Runeterra. They can last a lot of the times just 10 minutes, really. Rarely do they go 20 minutes plus. So with that in mind, we want to have some aggro units here, but the whole point of this deck is Decimate control, and it revolves around two cards. It revolves around Karma, which is a champion, and it revolves around Decimate, which the deck is named after. Now, this can be really dangerous when you pair it with Karma, because Karma, for those of you who don't know, normally her ability is that at the end of the round you create a random spell in hand, which is great and all. Okay, you have more spells to work with, but then she levels up when you're enlightened. This means that when you have a total of 10 mana, Karma gets enlightened. This does not include spell mana though. This is 10 regular mana. Okay, so usually if you don't have any cards like Catalyst of Aeons or anything like that to generate more mana for you, you're gonna have to do this at round 10. So let's say that because we don't have any ramp cards in our deck, you get to round 10, Karma flips into her evolved form, and now her ability changes to when you play a spell, you cast it again on the same target. So every time you play a spell, it doubles, basically. Now pair that with Decimate here, which is a 5-point mana card that deals 4 to the enemy Nexus. If you have Karma on your board and she's leveled up, now that doubles, and now you deal 8 to the enemy Nexus using only 5 mana. This is a slow card, so it can be countered with Deny, but because it targets Nexus, you can't fizzle this card out by targeting a unit on your board as you normally would be able to counter a slow card like that. Maybe like Dawn and Dusk, for example. You could just grasp in the Undying the target of the Dawn and Dusk, and then Dawn and Dusk doesn't work. Whereas here, they can't kill their own Nexus, right? So this works pretty well in that regard. Now, at round 10, let's say you have Karma, round 10, she's already on the board, so then she flips on round 10, and then it's your turn. You have at least 10 mana on round 10. If you were smart and wise, you saved your spell mana, and now you have 13 total mana, which is great because each one of these cards costs 5, which means you can play 2 of them for the cost of 10 mana. And if you have Karma on the board and she's leveled up, now those 2 Decimates turn into 4 Decimates. 4 times 4 is 16 damage to the enemy Nexus. They have a total of 20, so that means you just have 4 damage left to deal to the Nexus. The reason having 13 total spell mana at round 10 is useful is because this deck has a couple denies in it. In case they try to deny your Decimate, you can deny their deny. Now, where does the other 4 damage come from? Well, the beauty of this deck is that you don't even need to 100% win with Karma because your deck is so aggressive here. Because you have all of these very low cost cards and units that can deal a decent amount of damage for their worth and get a lot of value out of it. You have Inspiring Mentor in here, which is pretty good to combo with pretty much any card. It's really good with Navori Highwayman here, which I have in this deck, just because that helps you build your board a little bit, helps you be a little more defensive in case you need it. Because the thing about this deck is you are going to go from really aggro to really control with not too much in the mid game here. So mid-game decks are pretty good against this deck. I'd say that's probably the number one weakness is mid-range, because you don't really have too much mid-range stuff besides Karma, who you're not really going to fight with anyway, and then Captain Pharaon, which I'll get to here in a second. Let's just take this step by step. So this deck masquerades as an aggro deck, when in reality it's a control deck, because our trump card is the combination of Karma with Decimate. But that doesn't mean we can't do damage with our troops, like Legion Saboteur, that deals 1 to the enemy nexus every time it attacks, or Legion Grenadier, that deals 2 to the enemy nexus when it dies. So if you just sack 2 Legion Grenadiers, there's your 4 damage to the nexus right there. That one that we were looking for earlier when we were trying to calculate up to 20 with our Decimates. Because you have 16 damage coming from the Decimates, you only need 4 damage from other sources, and so Legion Grenadier here works really well if you only sack 2. But if you deal damage from other sources like Green Glade Duo, which is an elusive troop, so if they don't have any elusives, they can't block this. They'll have to use Vile Feast or Withering Wail if they're Shadow Isles to get rid of this. They'll have to use removal on this to deal with it. You can apply a lot of pressure with this card as well. Plus, when you summon an ally, you give it +1/0 this round, which pairs pretty decently with Zed as well, if you're able to have him on the board there. Zed is a super useful card here, so you want to try and draw him by round 3, so you can really turn up the heat and deal a lot of pressure and damage in the early game. Trifarian Glory Seeker is in this deck because it's a 2-point removal tactic, basically. This is kind of like a Mystic Shot, where you just put her down, use the challenger, grab someone on the other board, and just suicide headbutt rush right into their face. This is a good card to control the board with against mid-range decks, which I said is probably the number one weakness against a deck like this that accounts for late game and accounts for early game, but doesn't really account for example, Demacia soldiers that are 4/4, 5/5, 6/6, stuff like that. So Trifarian Glory Seeker is pretty useful because being a 5 power with Challenger, you can get rid of those mid-range threats pretty well, especially having cheap combat tricks like Rush, which will give you 1/0 and Quick Attack, or Brother's Bond, which will give 2 of your units +2/0. River Shaper is also a very useful card, super useful card, because every time you strike, you draw a spell, so this increases your chance of drawing Decimate, which is the card that you need to secure that win condition, or you just want to draw maybe Deny, because that's always useful. Twin Disciplines is a very versatile card if you are in that mid-range fight against that Radiant Guardian and you need another 3/0 to secure the kill. That could be useful as well, because we don't really have too many super duper big units here, except for Captain Pharaon, which again I'll get to here in a second. Culling Strike will also help you deny a lot of stuff early game. Maybe they also have a very aggro deck. Maybe they have a big wall that you can't get past. Culling Strike is just so useful. It gets rid of a lot of champions as well. It deals with Katarina, it deals with Zed, it deals with Lucian. You know, these really aggro champions, you can deal with them, you can deal with Braum. Stuff like that. Culling Strike is just a great card, and you might even want to have 3 of it in this deck if you so please. This is just the permutation that I went with for this video and for this deck. Shadow Shift, I really like this card simply because, you know, you can pair it well with Inspiring Mentor because it gives you back to your hand, and then you can play Inspiring Mentor, get another ally +1/1, or give the similar ally that you buffed earlier with this effect even more buffs. Whatever you want to do, Shadow Shift is pretty nice with that. It's also pretty decent with Legion Saboteur because let's say you attack, that skill activates, you deal 1 to the enemy nexus, but she's going to die in a strike against someone else, and then you have a Shadow Shift there. You can save her life. I mean, you're using a 3 mana card to save a 1 mana unit, so maybe that's not the best value for your buck, but it can be used to save any unit in any situation, so it can even save your Karma when you get on into that mid-range when you can finally summon her, and then you keep her alive, stuff like that. So Shadow Shift is just a useful card to have. And then Captain Pharaon here is just, one, a very big body, but two, is also like your final stand card in case your karma didn't evolve or all your karmas died or you need more decimates because they just had so much lifesteal or so much healing their nexus somehow got back up. Captain Pharaon is pretty big because think about this. You had karma sitting on your board probably a couple turns. She's been generating spells at the end of all those turns, so you do have a lot of cards in your hand. And when you play Captain Pharaon, he turns your entire hand into decimates. So you have a potential to have a lot of decimates, right? So if you're trying to outlast them, if they're trying to out-heal you, you can out-damage them with your decimates. Even if you don't have karma on the board anymore, yeah, it'll take longer to deal that damage, but now you have a big body with Captain Pharaon, and also he has Overwhelm, so he can punch through and deal damage like that as well. So now at that point, at that final straw, it becomes a waiting game and a game of chicken. Who can outlast who until you guys run out of cards or heals or whatever. So that's like a really last second situation. You kind of don't want to play Captain Pharaon unless you're absolutely convinced that you are unable to win with your current decimates and with your karma that's on the board. Now, in theory, the reason why this works so well, the big money maker here with this deck is not just this two-pronged attack on both ends of the curve where you have this crazy aggression in the beginning and you have this crazy control spell dominance in the end, just straight up hitting their nexus directly, where the only way they can really counter this is by using Deny. So if they're not Ionia, they're already at a disadvantage from the get-go if they don't have Ionia in their deck mix. Again, we have Denies here. Plus, I forgot to mention Karma generating random spells. There's a chance she can generate another Deny, or she can generate a different spell that can help you in the control game as well, like a Mystic Shot or whatever. But the beautiful part about this is that because this deck is so aggressive early game, you have a very high chance of baiting out a lot of removal spells, which is really important against something like Shadow Isles, which in the preview patches was the most dominant region. Just so many tools in the toolbox when it came to removal, when it came to units, when it came to infinite engines to have your win conditions set if you're a control deck using Shadow Isles, for example, like Atrocity Control. These cards function as bait because you're just hitting them so damn hard, especially if they don't have any elusive units. They're probably going to use like a Vile Feast or Withering Wail to try and get rid of your Green Glade duos. They might try to get rid of your Trifarian Glory Seekers or even River Shaper, because River Shaper can be pretty decent bait. Zed, of course, as a champion can be pretty decent bait as well, and you have 3 copies of him. So all of that bait being used here early game increases the likeliness of your Karma surviving when she's actually on the board, because now they have less tools in their toolkit to remove that Karma, because most Shadow Isle cards, like Grasp of the Undying, like the Box, like Black Spear, they deal 3 damage, and Karma has 3 health. So you really have to keep her alive until she gets to the late game and she can flip into the Evolved Karma. And when they use all those tools on these other guys, well, now your Karma's pretty safe because you don't have to attack with her, you don't have to defend with her. Unless they have Challenger, of course. And again, you have stuff like Shadow Shift, you have stuff like Brother's Bond or Rush, or even Health Potion to keep your Nexus alive if they have some sort of other tricks like that, if they have Burn from a Teemo deck or something along those lines. And that's why you have Twin Disciplines, all these cards to just in case bail out your Karma or bail out any one of your units in case you need it. And that's the Decimate control deck, or the one-turn kill Karma deck, or the combo Karma Zed aggro control deck, whatever you want to call it. I just ended up calling it Decimate control because without Decimate this deck doesn't work, so it made sense to just put that in the title. But it's also pretty aggro deck as well, and I think it's pretty unique, and I think it's worth trying out when the open beta launches and seeing how that works. I don't know what buffs or nerfs are going to occur, but it's still an interesting concept, and regardless, like I said, of how these cards change over time, I think this is a very interesting concept where you have so much pressure early game, you just drain them of all their resources, no pun intended, Shadow Isles. You drain them of all their resources, and then you get to this late game where you just have this trump card in Decimate, plus Karma being enlightened. It just seems like a really difficult thing to deal with unless they have just a lot of cards that clear the board. That's really the one thing that I can think of that would really ruin this deck. And of course, if they just have such a strong mid-range deck where none of these combat tricks keep you going, where you just can't last till round 10 to get that karma online, then I can see this deck having some issues. But again, I need to test it out, and this was just a giant theory craft. But I want to get it out there so you guys can help me test it out. That's why I need you guys to upvote it and try it out when the game launches in open beta January 23rd if you pre-registered on their website. I know this video was kind of long, but I really do appreciate you guys sticking around all the way through. I hope you found it useful, entertaining, enjoyable, educational, any of the above. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe, and also notification bell so you guys never miss another video. And as always, make sure you all have a wonderful day. Peace. He does not have a counter for it. Get out of here, boy! Fuck out of here with that bullshit! Fuck out of here with that bullshit!